there is this culture that women don't have the freedom to be in charge. By in charge, I mean like for my own autonomy and for my own mobility. Women have to be seeking for permission for everything.
We say that the revolution in Pakistan has to start at the home. And this is what we have seen with something like the Aurat March. We have started this, we've seen the seeds of that. We see women fighting at home.
A lot of men are gonna be like, how much azadi do you want?
So many young women come up and they say, oh, this is started conversation. I fought with my family to come to the Aurat March. A lot of that feminism is what I call it, is happening at the home.
How free do you want to be? Some men like message me in my DMs and go like, if you did not have any azadi, you would not be speaking openly about this on social media now.
One of our biggest naras is azadi. That we want azadi.
Freedom.
Particularly in South Asia, so much of the patriarchal control is actually on our bodies. One of our biggest slogans is Mera Jism Meri Marzi, which means my body, my choice. In all of South Asia, there's this concept of women being the honor of the house.
Somebody's honor can't be connected to what I'm doing. This is the sick most part of desi society, like this whole sickness of honor.
And I think that this is one of the reasons our slogans of Mera Jism Meri Marzi hits and cuts so deep.
So welcome. Thank you for taking the time and speaking with me.
Thank you for having me. I know we have been trying to organize this for a while. I am so glad we can finally speak.
I'm super happy that I can speak to somebody who's an Aurat March organizer, a women's march organizer in Karachi. And this is my first time of actually speaking with someone on a video. It's really exciting. I've only ever spoken to people on an audio note just to interview them, and then that's about it. But I've been writing about the Aurat March for a long time. I was at the first Aurat March in Karachi in 2018.
Oh wow, nice.
Like the inaugural Aurat March. Yeah, it was really nice. I used to work as a journalist in Pakistan at the time. So it's a very special connection, and now it's 7 years old.
Yeah, we've done 7, and yeah, this year will be the 8th. This will be the so yes, pretty soon.
How did you get into this? Hopefully.
It's a good question. I keep on thinking, I keep on thinking about reasons of why we all sort of have gotten into it. I think Aurat March has so many women, now across Pakistan doing marches and organizing. I think the reason is that I really grew up in a very, very, I would say, patriarchal household. And so where like my father was, although, he would say things like, oh, it's important for girls to be educated, it's important for you to get good grades. But there were other things which were really sort of, which I would say are quite perhaps regular in a lot of Pakistani households. There's a lot of restrictions on mobility, on agency. There was a lot of suspicion about, don't talk to boys, are you talking to men? It was a lot of that. There was a lot of sort of at some point in our, as in a lot of our households, there's a lot of domestic violence, things like that. So I think I think I was 13 or 14 when I started to think about that all of this is actually unfair. This is not about just that I'm doing something, and this is not just a parent daughter relationship. And I think the other reason is also that I had, particularly on my mother's side, a lot of very strong women. Um, I belong to a Urdu speaking family, so my great grandmother was in the Muslim League in the Congress. She was part of the freedom movement, in the independence of Pakistan freedom movement, and then also my grandmother, my nani, who I was very close to growing up. She was definitely like somebody who very empathic, very, very about community building. Every Monday, there were all of the women in our family, and a large extended family would get together, right? And so there was a lot of culture about women taking care of each other as well. So I think a lot of that made an impression on me as a young person. And then just generally when I went to university, I kind of got into activism, and this will tell you how old I am. But basically, like we protested the Iraq War. I went to university in Canada. We protested the Iraq War. I was very much a part of the
Amazing.
Palestinian, the freedom of Palestinian movement. So there was a lot of that, and then I moved back to Pakistan, And yeah, so started, I would say started early based on a lot of different life experiences as well. So yeah.
Yeah, I understand 100% what you mean by growing up in a patriarchal household.
Hmm.
I mean, my family was not initially, but eventually supportive of the fact that I go abroad to study.
Hmm.
But there were nuances that there is a deadline, you need to get married at some point,
Yes. Hmm.
and you can do everything, but it's always like a bargain for freedom.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, if you're going abroad to do your master's or get your whatever college degree, then we need something in return, and then maybe you can get married. It's always this, you're bargaining your freedom all the time
Absolutely.
in
Absolutely.
a Pakistani or an Indian or South Asian family or a predominantly Muslim family as well in a lot of cultures. So I understand. And since the Aurat March started, how was the march born? I believe you've been there from the first
Yeah.
year.
Yeah. So actually, it was really. I was just talking about this yesterday with sort of some people who joined this year, right? It was actually literally one of our friends. She contacted a few of us. She said, let's meet for chai. I want to talk about this, and so she's a lawyer here, and we were all trying to do feminist work in our own ways, in our little silos. And she basically, like she said, let's meet. And we so literally met at a dhaba, right? Like a chai tea stall, and like where we would just hang out and talk or whatever, talk politics. And a lot of us were activists. A lot of us were working on different things. Some of us were working on missing persons, the practice of picking up people extrajudicially or extrajudicial killings. And some of us were working with, like I was working with fisher women at that time, things like that. So we were all doing something. And she said, let's do it. So there were literally three or four of us at a dhaba, and we just decided. We said, we're going to do the march. We're going to do a march. And I would say that although the politics is not similar, but we were looking at some of the other women's marches around the world, right? And just the fact that also, Trump had gotten elected, and a lot of American women had come out on the street, right? So we were looking at what that did, right? We looked at sort of the power of walking on the street, of coming together, of women coming together, of all ages, of all sort of income backgrounds, and what it can do. So I think a lot of us sort of unconsciously also knew that, or we just that the time was right, that we had to now
Right.
get out. So
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. I talk about this very often, and in fact, I posted a video recently where I said that nothing outrages me more than when men protect other men's bad behavior.
mhm, mhm.
It just it just does something in my brain, and I just explode. Even though I've worked on exploding quite a bit, and I don't explode anymore as easily. Like, it's also something you age and then you
Yeah.
grow, and you're like, you don't explode over everything. But it just makes me so mad when they protect their behavior, and it makes me think of Hollywood. For years and
Mhm,
years and
mhm,
years,
mhm.
the power play has stayed intact, and people have protected each other, and men in Hollywood have protected each other, and now we hear about all these cases. And it makes me so mad that there are other people who are outraged that women are marching. Like, I remember the first Aurat March in Pakistan, and I was there, and really proper educated men who you would imagine wouldn't really have a comment about it just started sending me messages on Facebook like, women like you who are already going to the march are not women who need the freedom. And I'm like, what do you mean?
Mhm, mhm.
We march as a society. Like,
Yeah.
I was really confused. Why do we have so much outrage over Aurat March? Why is this something that divides the society so quickly?
Um, it's a good question, because I think one of the things which we've understood is that we are shaking things up. The reason we even did the first Earth March, because, like you said, right, there's a lot of sort of misogyny in our households, right? There's a lot of patriarchy in our households, in society, in government, everywhere, right? And I understand, in Pakistan, there's a very common thing that often some men say, it's like when you say, oh, this happens to women here, they'll say, but it happens everywhere, right? So, right, of course, absolutely, that there is a certain level of patriarchy and misogyny across the world, and we're seeing it. We're seeing it in different forms, right? And just so like that, that's it's over here, right? Like we see it. We see it on an everyday household. We see it in politics. We see it at work. And we were specifically calling that out, and we were calling that out in a big way. I remember, if you're talking about the first Aurat March, there was this poster called "Khana Khud Garam Karo," which means warm up your own food, right? And it was just something so simple got such an outrage, where I know that there were some of my male work friends would say, but then, like, my wife shouldn't be asking me to drive to like buy yogurt if she can't warm up my own food. Just breaking up of some gender roles at home caused that kind of outrage, because the outrage, I feel, is part of the resistance now, right? Like, we're pushing up against sort of the traditional way of doing things, um, and and the resistance that we see, the resistance that's now come out in the streets. I want to say that before the Aurat March, it's not like the resistance didn't exist. And so there were a lot of people fighting that at their homes. There was a feminist movement in the 80s, in the 70s and 80s, that fought against a military dictatorship. So it has always been there, right? What Aurat March did was just bring it into the mainstream.
Yeah.
We brought in, and the thing is, there's a word in Urdu, uh, and I know there's also Salman Khan movie with it. It's called Dabang, right? And it means sort of this
The
bravery,
bang,
this
yeah.
courage, without giving a shit. And I feel that there is a little bit, or actually a lot of that, within the people who come to the Aurat March, more than us, also more than the organizers. The younger women who are coming out, the younger trans people who come out, and they're just like, we are sick of it. We are going to hold our song. We are going to shoot the strap, and we are going to speak up. So, so I really feel that Aurat March became the voice of so many young women, and also older women, but I would say definitely a lot more young women who were just sick of it. We're just fighting and fighting, fighting at home, fighting at work, fighting against any kind of violence, harassment. That all of a sudden they have this place and they could speak up. And hey, the society doesn't necessarily like that, right? Or some
Yeah.
part of society doesn't really like that. We also have a lot of love, a lot of women support us, a lot of people come, and so it's like fighting. It's like kind of like a conflict in our society, right? Like, where there are some people who are becoming more and more anti-women, and then some
Yeah.
people really opening up, and women having that courage. So yeah, I don't know if I answered your question fully, but yeah.
My theory is that women marching or women saying that we're not going to put up with this and this anymore, it actually threatens the
Yeah,
patriarchy. And
absolutely.
I don't mean this loosely, that oh, threatens the, I mean it like really, it threatens the patriarchy. And you see that in the reactions of people who benefit from the patriarchy. For example, men, or even a lot of women who have a certain mindset. It also threatens their very, very internal reality, what's going on. Like, all these women are like, we want freedom and we want to be able to do things our way and we want to work and we don't want to be defined by gender roles. In fact, very recently, like 1 week ago, I posted a video and I had no intention to actually rattle anybody, but I just simply said in this video, like on one of my podcast episodes, that in Pakistan, if you're a woman, no matter where you work, no matter how accomplished you are, no matter how financially secure you are, you could be working at NASA or the UN or wherever.
Hmm.
But when you're on the dinner table, people will only talk about how well you can raise children and
Yeah. Yeah.
how well you can cook biryani. And people were ballistic in the comments. Like, it was like,
What were the
oh
comments?
my
What were some of the
god.
comments?
The comments, one guy said something like, actually, several men said, oh, really good that you did not marry a Pakistani man. You saved a Pakistani man. And I'm like, Like
Yeah.
Pakistani men need saving. Like
Really, like
you're
really?
accepting like
Yeah.
you guys
Yeah.
need saving now.
Yeah.
And then this other guy was like, oh, if you do work at NASA, then it's fine. But if you are like an average Joe from wherever, and he used a very desi word for it. He was like, if you are some Salma from Bradford, then you better be cooking. And I was
Yeah.
like you are so threatened by a woman just stating a fact that you cannot take it. And it's like 800, 900 comments on that thread, and people are really angry, and a lot of women are angry.
And what
A
will?
lot of them,
Yeah.
a lot of women, I mean, it's been a week now that I read a lot of the comments, but some women were like, oh, but this is Islam, and you're supposed to
Mm,
do things, and we sacrifice for our families because we're the women, and we make their homes. And I'm like, I mean, I don't respond to all of them, but the truth is, I'm not disputing that. We do things for our families, we
yeah.
do things for our husbands, we do things for our children, but this has to be a
Yeah.
choice. You know,
Yeah.
that's the problem. That's the point that they miss.
Yeah. But it's also like it's also that it has to be a choice, and it also has to be that it has to be shared, right? Like we talk a lot about sort of the labor within the family, right? And how much labor falls on the women. You know, a few years ago we had this, you know, this poster of a rupee note with a woman on the rupee note, and that caused a massive outrage.
I love that.
Yeah, it caused massive outrage,
Oh my god.
and basically they said, you know, you have gone against the founder of Pakistan, because usually that's on the rupee note. It's his picture, and we said we were making the claim that women run the economy and run the sort of the society, and by that we meant like women's labor, because we say that women make societies, like they're the ones taking care of the elderly, they're raising children, they're making society, right? In
Yeah,
addition, and look, all of this is unpaid labor, completely
exactly.
unacknowledged and unpaid labor.
This has to be economically
Yeah,
quantified in some way.
absolutely. So even if the woman is making the choice to stay at home with the kids or raising the family or making biryani for everyone else, right? That doesn't like that has
Has to
to
be
adapt.
acknowledged.
So we actually have this demand of asking the government that we want social security for women, because all of this labor that they're doing, it's not getting, there's no remuneration, there's nothing. And so you see women in Pakistan, and you see this, and you may have heard of this as well, is that they're working for years and years and years. So they'll raise the kids, they'll get older, and then they won't get anything. They, you know, we hear of divorces of 50-year-old, 60-year-old women who don't get anything. You know, I know there's an inheritance law, but and which, you know, we can talk about that, you know, on how fair it is, but essentially women don't even get that, right? And then
Yeah,
of
and
course
divorces
we're
are so nasty.
yeah, and then of course working class women who may not necessarily even have those inheritances to begin with, right? Also don't get much for any of the household labor that we do. So one thing that we actually have always understood, Coco, is that we say that the revolution in Pakistan has to start at the home, right? We live in a very deeply entrenched family system, and that in that kind of society. And this is what we have seen with something like the Aurat March. We have started this. We've seen the seeds of that. We see women fighting at home, and you
Yeah,
know, as a result of knowing that okay, I am not the only one fighting, right? We have, you know,
yeah,
and I have, you know, so many young women come up and they say, oh, this has started conversation. I fought with my family to come to the Art March. This is the first time I've asserted myself. There's so many different there's so many of these stories. There's so many women who come and they're like, you know, we spoke up, you know, we reported our husband like you know, beating us, things like that. And so a lot of those fights, a lot of that feminism is what I call it, is happening at the home, right? And it's directly tied to women's labor.
yeah. I remembered a comment from that reel that I was talking about while you were speaking. This other man, he was talking down at me, and he said something like, oh, she thinks that working at NASA or the UN, and the reason I said UN is because I used to work there. And he's telling me, oh, she thinks working at NASA, working at the UN is harder than raising kids. Like, how divorced from reality are you? And these were not his words, but this was the point he was making.
Mm.
And I'm like, that's literally not what I'm saying. Like,
Yeah.
a lot of people, a lot of men, when they behave like that, they are just simply threatened.
Yeah.
Because a lot of them also don't realize it, but at a subconscious level, the patriarchy favors them.
Mm-hmm.
When they come home, there's someone to heat up the food for them.
Yeah.
And a lot of women actually wrote on, I mean, all the hate aside, there was also a lot of support. Some women were like, the typical mentality of the Pakistani men is reflected in the comments. Like, you're proving her right, like
Yeah.
literally what she's saying.
Yeah.
And some other women were like, I actually, it was so heartening to see so many women actually have like home cooking businesses. And a lot of them have Instagram accounts, and not all of them have millions of followers, but that's the reason why I didn't know so many of them. And now I know so many of them because so many of them commented. And I was like, this is amazing. Like,
Yeah.
we do really well in the kitchen, and now we're monetizing that
Yeah.
in some way.
Yeah.
And they were all like, you're 100% right. This is totally true. And a lot of men will hate it. And some men were also like, as a Pakistani man, I just want to say that she's right.
Mm. Great.
Like, I just want to take this. And I was like, but the numbers between men who were supporting and numbers of men who were upset or threatened or whatever, acting out, there was a gulf of difference between that. But I just think that a lot of them are threatened and they don't even realize, because their masculinity is so wounded. I don't think they realize that
Yeah,
themselves.
and and think about it. A lot of men don't like it when I say this. In the interviews, a lot of my male friends don't like it when I say it. But who wants that their free labor or someone who's literally working for them for free all of a sudden starts to speak up, right? It's also sort of this deeply entrenched, like you're saying, right? Like if if a man comes home from work and they also they don't have the home cooked food right away, or the warm home cooked food right away on their table, essentially they are losing out. And so this is when you say the patriarchy favors men. I hear a lot of this, right, around that patriarchy is bad for all genders. And absolutely it is. Right? Absolutely. It is the patriarchy that says men can't cry, can't show emotion, sure. No one's disagreeing with that. But one also has to realize that patriarchy really favors the man and really puts the man on top of the woman in the family, at work, at so many other places. And essentially, men are getting a lot out of women's labor. And if women start questioning that, if women start to talk about that, it really kind of disrupts a lot of the benefits that men are getting. And of course, there are some men who realize that and who stand with women, right? Who said they have a sense of justice, they have a sense. But literally, once you start to document, and I'm particularly talking about Pakistan, when you start to document women's unpaid, unacknowledged labor, whether that is care labor, whether that is labor that they're doing, working in people's homes, like things like that. When you start to acknowledge that, one can kind of see I can say it in Urdu, but not so much English, but it's almost like it's a game which is being played by women, right? By not by women, I mean for women, right? Like it's something that they're kind of is something that's kind of been told to them, right? When you grow up in a Pakistani household, for many women, you're told, okay, you have to learn how to cook because once you get married, you're gonna need to cook the whole family, right? Like for the whole family, or the fact that your main role is for you to raise your family and take care of your kids, right? All of that is little. It's being told to us, right? Whether it's in our home, whether it's in society, whether it's on TV, things like that. It's so deeply entrenched. And now
Yeah.
that women have started to question that, right? No wonder the men have a little bit of a problem with it, or maybe a big
Yeah.
problem with it.
They have a huge
Yeah.
problem, and a lot of men actually go like, well, we're earning the money,
Mm.
so the least you can do
Yeah.
is to take care of the household. And I'm like, where do you draw that line?
Yeah.
I mean, do I make the bed, or do I make the bed of your mother and your sister and your father and your whatever? And then where's that boundary?
Yeah, yeah. Absolutely.
And
And also like why can't some of this be shared? And it's because essentially and who's measuring that? Right? Like when you are at a job, right, you are measured, you're given work according to the hours, you get sick leaves, you get, what are women getting? Right? They no matter what, they have to get up and make food for their kids, for the family when they wake up, even if they're sick, even if whatever,
yeah, there's no day off.
there's no day off. There's literally so there's I'm going to say it in Urdu,
Yeah.
and maybe it gets I can translate it. But this year we're really thinking about this as one of our naras. One of our biggest naras is azadi, right? That we want azadi, which means we want freedom. Yeah,
Freedom.
one of the naras that we're the chants, the slogans that we're writing this year is "Aurat ghar ka hissa hai, gulam nahi," which means that women are a part of a household, not the servant or not the serf, right? That they're not like houses should not be run or a home cannot be run by a woman being in servitude, right? Like anyone
I love
else,
that.
she has to be part of the household. She has to have agency. And so that's essentially what we're going to be talking about this year as well with the Audit March. We are holding the Audit March on Mother's Day this year on 11th May. So
Mhm.
yeah, so a lot of this is going to be coming up, and there are going to be a lot of angry men.
Oh, a lot of men are gonna be like, how much azadi do you want? How free do you wanna be? Some men like message me in my DMs and go like, if you did not have any azadi, you would not be speaking openly about this on social media. And I was like, okay, your perception of the world is very narrow. Like you live between your Instagram account and mine,
Yeah,
literally.
yeah.
So
No, and also I feel like what you said in the beginning of the call, where people are saying things like women who are going to the Aurat March don't need the freedom. You know, there's a lot of commentary on any resistance across the world which is by women, right? So from the Greta Thunbergs, right, to the Aurat March, to Malala,
to
yeah,
Malala,
to
oh
Malala.
Jesus
But
Christ, the way we
I,
treat Malala.
yeah, but I don't see that kind of backlash against uh, against activists who are men. And of course, there's some, sure, but it's like this, the amount of surveillance, the amount of criticism. It's like, it really goes behind this kind of idea in patriarchy about the perfect women, right? About the good women and the bad
Yeah,
women, right? Like,
yeah,
so it's very much like so I see a lot of this backlash as part of the resistance, right? So the fact that you're
yeah.
making these videos, the fact that like you're doing this podcast and talking about this is also part of the resistance. And so the backlash we believe will come, you know,
Definitely.
and we continue to live and fight another day, basically.
No, this is also, by the way, in Germany. The German foreign minister split up with her husband a few months ago, and local media in Germany is actually pretty tabloidy. It's very surprising, but people couldn't shut up about how she could not manage being a foreign minister, and how she could not manage her work and home when the last foreign minister had split up with his partner 3 times and he was a
Hmm.
man. Nobody said anything. So this is also actually in Europe.
Yeah, it's definitely it's I would say it's definitely a global phenomenon, right? The kind of sort of backlash you see politicians, women politicians, activists, um, sort of face, right? And the kind of pedestal, the kind of expectations that we have for them, and we face a lot of this in the audit march, right? Like every time this happens, like we have like the incidence of rape in Pakistan is essentially like it's basically it's two rapes reported every hour, and these are just reported, right? There's a lot of if somebody documents it, like people will be like, but why is the Aurat March not speaking up about this? Aurat March but the cannot report two rapes every hour, right? We do not have the capacity. We're a volunteer kind of run movement. And of course, we speak up. We speak up about rape, or we speak up about some strategic cases which are not being talked about, or where we believe we need to put our politics and our narrative out. But essentially, this is the thing: this kind of expectation of resistance from women is also part of the patriarchy, right? So I often feel that, like, I know this is going to be a little bit controversial, but I don't listen to men talk about feminism anymore, right? I just kind of zone out. I'm just like, if you are not out in the arena fighting, then I don't know if you got to have an opinion on resistance, which is actually being led by women, right? Led by women and trans people.
I love that.
Yeah.
They're gonna
I
hate
think it
it.
just has to, yeah,
No, seriously. Like, you don't know the first thing you're talking about. Why are you talking?
yeah.
There's a lot of this culture in Pakistan and in a lot of conservative societies where women are fighting, but especially in South Asia. This is especially the subcontinent culture, I think, because I don't see this so much in South America and other parts of
Mhm.
the world. There is this constant culture where women have to be seeking for permission for everything. So if
Mhm.
you want to work a job, you have to ask your male guardian. If you want to work or go out with your friends, you have to let someone know. You can't just jet off and be like, okay, see you when I see you. There is this culture that women don't have the freedom to be in charge. By in charge, I mean like for my own autonomy and for my own mobility.
Mhm. Mhm.
Why is that and how can that change?
Hmm. I think I think there is definitely, particularly in South Asia, but I think globally also we've seen this. One of our biggest slogans is "Mera jism meri marzi," which means "My body, my choice." And we've gotten a lot of backlash, a lot of criticism, particularly from the religious right wing in Pakistan, but from other spaces as well. And a lot of men say to us, but why do you need to say, like, we talk to them about agency. We say that this is about agency, that we have an agency over our bodies, about our own lives. We should have the choice to get educated, to go to work, to do whatever, marry whoever we want to, right? And then they say, okay, but why do you have to say, my body, my choice? You could also say, my identity, my choice, things like that, right? And I said the question really here to ask is, why does it make the men feel uncomfortable when I say my body, my choice, or mera jism meri mercy? And the reason I think, is that particularly in South Asia, so much of the patriarchal control is actually on our bodies, right? So there is so much restriction on our mobility. You can't go out at night. You have to seek permission. You can't go out. The whole concept, and in Pakistan particularly, we saw this at the time of General Ziaul Haq when we had the military dictator, right? He had this policy which we said that the woman's right is to stay in the home. So there's a chadar and chardi body, right? So a woman's true place is in the home, and the true form of women is to wear a chadar, is to cover herself, right? And particularly with the chadar, right? So it's more covering than what you may already do, right? So essentially, some of that in Pakistan comes from there as well, right? Some of what the state has done in the 80s and the 70s. But essentially, the patriarchal control we see, particularly in Pakistan, is on the woman's body, right? So when a woman does not have a choice to decide when she wants to have a baby, right? We see so much of that across class in Pakistan, actually, where the women are forced to just keep on reproducing, regardless of whether they want to or not, right? And especially even in educated households, this can often be the case, right? There is so much control on women's body, on women's sexuality. There's still so much forcing of, okay, sort of in terms of choice of marriage, right? So I think that we have to look at the patriarchal control as not just sort of an idea about sort of controlling women, but actually controlling our bodies, controlling our
Yeah,
autonomy,
oh my
controlling our
God.
sexuality. And I think that this is one of the reasons our slogans of Mera Just a Meri Marzi hits and cuts so deep, right? Because we're
Yeah.
saying that we have complete autonomy and we're going to fight for complete autonomy.
Yeah, the choice of marriage part is so personal to me because my partner is from Germany.
Hmm.
And my parents were so desperate that I get married. And now, when I was like, okay, well, I have a partner who's from here and I want to marry this person, they were not happy. It was like, it's your biggest dream that I get married. But because it's happening on my own terms, and because this is so out of your comfort zone, that the person's not only European but also white, and they don't have a Muslim name, and they come from a non Muslim background, that it was just not good enough. So I was like, okay, so well, basically, you did not want me to get married. You wanted me to get married to a person of of your choice. You wanted
Yes.
me to marry somebody of your choice, somebody who
Mm.
you would find for me, somebody who you deem suitable for me. And I remember having this conversation along the way so many times where they would say to me, my family would say stuff to me like, oh, but we're so supportive. And I'm like, well, the fact that
Mm.
you have to tell me every 2 months how supportive you are, it means that you're not exactly supportive. And then, this whole thing, oh, but you should have some patience. And if somebody's saying something, you should just listen. I was like, why do you want to say things to me that I have to cultivate patience to get through? Like, why do I need to sit through this conversation? I don't really need to. And I feel so bad for so many women who live with their parents and they have no way out because they're so, like, they're literally on their nerves to get married. And then if they bring somebody, well, we want to marry this person, they're still not happy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Absolutely. Absolutely.
this was so telling. I would have never been able to understand how deeply entrenched this is until my own
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And I think it's like this thing, right? We see this in South Asian societies, particularly, right? That we see so much of those decisions of marriage happening between men, right? So there's this implicit sort of thinking that, oh, I'm the one who's in control of her life, so the father, right? And you see this actually globally also. And now it is that if it's a heterosexual marriage, it's very much that the man is going to come and ask the father. It's very much that I am now giving over sort of the person that I was responsible for. But if you look at it, right, when a child is born into a family, it's both the parents who are responsible, right? The mother is as responsible for the daughter as the father is, sometimes even more,
Even
right? In
more.
terms of taking care, even in terms of nurturance. But often we see this, that in terms of decisions of marriage and even marriages which may be so arranged, right? And I'm not one of those which was going to say that all arranged marriages are necessarily bad or that there isn't levels of consent or but at the same time we look at the sort of control, and really, let's be honest, in a lot of South Asian backgrounds, the way a woman is raised is very much about that she could get the best match, right? Or that she gets proposals and she gets married. And so it's like, it's basically from the beginning, from when you were born, that a lot of these things are actually written for you, right? Like that, you have to look a particular way, otherwise you may not get married. You need to be able to like get an education, and if this, don't get educated too much, right? Like so there's a lot of those messagings, and of course, look, it's not standard. Perhaps it's not happening in every home, but this is kind of what we're seeing. And this is one of the reasons why we keep on saying that the resistance may not necessarily like in South Asia, and particularly feminist resistance in South Asia, isn't just about changing a particular law, right? Or it isn't just about having women in politics, which is completely necessary. Women should be in politics, but it is about opening of society, about changing minds, changing how families operate, right? Changing how society treats women. And so in this way, we also see our movement, the Aurat March to be very much a movement that's looking to shake up society, not just necessarily ask the government for better laws or, to enforce some of these progressive laws, but essentially to change the patriarchal mindset. I have some over the years, some Indian feminists have reached out to us, and of course some Nepalese and Bangladeshi feminists as well, right? And they say to us, they say, some of the slogans that we see, they hit home. One slogan which obviously a lot of men were also very angry about a few years ago was uh, "Mujhe kya pata hai, tumhara mosa kahan hai," which means like, I don't know where your sock is, right? And there were these feminists in India. They were just like, "Oh my god!" When we saw this, it hit home.
Oh my god.
Yeah. So I think the sort of the level of entitlement to women's labor at the home, or to being a wife, or to being sort of a caregiving mother, is so deep in our South Asian society, and it really, really needs to be challenged. It really needs to come apart. Is what we think actually.
Oh, wow, I love that. It's true. Women literally know where the man keeps his socks. Ugh, it's a bit cringy
Yeah, and the
actually.
fact is that the man doesn't know where his socks are.
I mean, I don't
Yeah,
understand. Are these like men or are these children? Because sometimes when women talk about their husbands, it's like they're
it's
talking
very much.
about their child.
Yeah.
And some women actually celebrate, oh, my husband can cook, my husband can make tea. Okay, so
Yeah, yeah. And also just that it's so unique and special, right? It's also just like they celebrate, or they'll say, oh, like once a year he made tea for me on Mother's Day. Like it's and I think that, like, great that he did, right? Like, but essentially, like, why, like, isn't the home everyone's
yeah, but
home?
the fact that
Yeah,
he made it once a year on Mother's Day, he's just proven the point that he doesn't want to do it and he'll do it
yeah.
once a day, and that this is not something
And that
that's,
it's a favor. Yeah,
yeah, exactly, that's reserved for him. It's something reserved for the wife.
yeah, yeah.
So it's, oh my god, it's, so I feel like, so a lot of what I want to talk about in general on the podcast is about, I want to talk about sexuality, sex liberties. But I feel like, and also within a South Asian framework, I don't want to talk about it in a framework that was exported from liberal America. Well, there's a sexual revolution, you can start having sex like men. I don't want to do that. But what I want to basically focus on is the fact that when women get married, a lot of women get married from their parents' houses. So you're living with your father, who's your guardian, and then your husband's your guardian immediately overnight. And then you go from being, at least to the world, you go from being this person who's completely sexually inactive to somebody who's expected to sleep with a total stranger. You're lucky if you don't feel that your partner is a stranger, but you are a stranger essentially. You've never lived with this person, so no matter how much you know them, you need a little bit of time. And this is the craziest overnight switch in my brain. I'm just like, so you go from being a girl to a woman overnight, and you have no sexual awakening. And I feel like being able to talk about this and how women can have a smooth sexual awakening, I feel like we're thousands of years away from that. Because right now we're getting people to acknowledge that we're not your property. Like, it's my body and I can do what I want with it.
Yeah,
How do you see this
absolutely.
playing out in the current climate?
So I think one of the things about in our society, right, which of course, women get screwed over, if I were to say, as part is that we don't talk about a lot of this openly, right? That we are not, that perhaps women may not be allowed to speak about some of these problems or the challenges of marrying someone who they may not know, or all of a sudden they are expected to perform sexually, or with people who they may not know very well, or for or that they may not have a lot of knowledge around those, around what does sex mean, like what does it mean, all of those things, right? And I think that it's hard for men when it's not talked about, and it is hard for women, right? And I think that it's big. A lot of some of those conversations happen privately amongst women, right? So we have this thing about younger women being able to talk about some of this with older women in their family. We have a little bit of culture of that, particularly in different ethnicities in Pakistan. Some ethnicities are a little bit more open talking about it, than other ethnicities. But essentially, it also comes back to agency, right? So a lot of the younger women that we work with, right? We work with communities throughout the year. We work with different communities across the class, and this kind of issue comes up. I think one of the things is how much agency does the woman have in this? Because if a woman is uncomfortable, in essentially sleeping with a stranger right after marriage, one of the things we always say is that, like, it's important to state that, right? Because for us, what is central is consent. And then so a woman's consent, a woman's um, being ready to you know to be intimate with another person has to be her choice. And so a lot of the times what we do is, like, we'll have those conversations with women, and if they say that, it's always about, okay, take your time. If you feel like you need to get to know the person before you get to know the person before, um, but Coco, I really think it comes down to agency. I feel like the more agency that happens for women, I think as a society, we may not head into the direction of speaking about it openly, right? Like you said, we're 100 years away from that, or 500 years away from that. I don't know. But it's essentially, even if it's not being spoken up about openly, the agency and the right needs to belong to the woman of, you know, when she wants to have sex after marriage.
What kind of information or education does a woman need going into a marriage? Like, is there something that she could perhaps do before she gets married, which is also socially acceptable and that she's not slut shamed for it? Because I mean, even going to an OBGYN in Pakistan, if you're not married, it's a
Is
bit
it?
of why you here.
Yeah, yeah. I think, I think what we can. I think it's a good idea. It's something good to think through. I think that a lot of that happens informally. I think a lot of older women may be giving some of that sort of information to younger women. But I also think that you know there has to be more work in this area, where because a lot of women are terrified. They're terrified when they get married, right? Because they often don't know how to handle sort of, and not just this, but handle other areas, right? It's difficult to be assertive. It's difficult, and so it really comes down to, I think, empowering and educating the woman herself, right? So I think that there can be programs, there can be information, and there are one of the things that we're seeing now, particularly in urban cities in Pakistan, is that a lot of people are accessing information online as well, right? So a lot of women are reading up, a lot of men are reading up about, and of course, there's some sort of, some people go towards sort of the dark path on that as well, but, or I don't even know whether one can call it the dark path, but essentially, it's the information and the empowerment, the agency has to come to the through the woman, I believe. Even if it's done sort of on a one-on-one basis, if it's done on um, you know, yeah, even if it's not spoken up about openly.
What education can we give men to deal with that, to respond
Hmm.
better to these situations?
So look, I have a bit of a controversial view on this, and not all feminists agree with me on this. But it is not my job to educate men. It is not my job as a feminist, as a woman, to rehabilitate men. Maybe I can choose to educate men who are my friends, who are my family. But as feminists and as someone who's working on the ground, we get this question asked a lot: why don't you work with men? And there is a little bit, we have a group of male allies. This year we're trying that the male allies go and speak to other men, educate them about, some of the challenges that women are facing in society. But it is, especially living in this patriarchal society, it is not my job to educate masses of men on, um, you know, on essentially rights of what we believe are human beings,
I
right?
love that. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. I mean, we don't have so much
So,
energy and so much time.
and it's that, and
It's not our job. Yeah.
yeah, and one thing again, this is something which sometimes people get angry with me about, but but basically, it is true. It is true that in our society, there are certain sections of society who have not been exposed to some of these ideas, right? They may have been taught that, oh no, you have to overpower the women, you have to be the one in control, you have to be the one to lead women, right? They have not necessarily been exposed to ideas of equality, and I understand that. um, but then there are a lot of sections of our society which have been exposed to those ideas, right? We see, and particularly in some upper class households and in some high class, elite class households, where a lot of men who have been exposed to those ideas, right? They have been educated in those ideas, and yet we don't see them promoting equality.
Yeah, I just feel like the upper class were
In
making
some,
Zahir Jafars in upper
yes,
class. Literally, I
yes,
feel like
yes,
the upper class is just worse in some ways.
yes, exactly. And like, for example, could you really educate Zahir Jafar? I don't know. I don't think so. So I think one of the things which was integral to the Aurat March, when we also began, was we said that we are here to build power for women, to make our society strong, where women get strong enough to get their rights. So it's not just about educating men; it's also about power being given to women. That when injustice is done, that they can speak up. And of course, to a day where we hope to live in an equal society, a much more humane society. But until then, my job is not to educate women. My job is to get women together so we can be so strong that, or we can have such a strong voice
Yeah.
that, you know, that we can stop some of the sort of the patriarchy and
I
misogyny.
agree with you, and actually, I understand 100% because I want to talk about sex for women, how women can be on a journey of radical self acceptance and realizing their self worth. I don't care about educating men. Like, my platform is
Yes,
not to cover men's rights, and I've never had a man who's a guest on this podcast, and maybe that's going to change. Maybe I will have a man someday, but my
yeah,
point is not to start a men's rights platform. So I completely agree with you and I hear you because they are responsible for themselves. And if they feel
yes,
like if other men feel like with their fellow males are
yes,
not progressive enough, maybe they have to start this movement within themselves. I mean, they will start it if they start protecting each
absolutely.
other's behaviors, but they often protect each other's bad behavior, which is very common. Like, the allyship is very toxic. If more men stop getting threatened and responding and being so reactive, I feel like they could actually focus on the fact that Aurat March or Women's March or women's rights are a reality. Women wanting freedom are a reality. Just because they're constantly acting out, it doesn't change that.
Yeah,
And then they can get together and learn something. But that's also like a huge mindset shift that's
yeah,
required. Like, what I'm saying is basically a huge dismantling of ego
yes, yes.
for it to happen. It's not so
Yeah.
easy.
But I think one of the things is that, and I think that some men have gotten it. Some men realize this, that you know, particularly around personal relationships in the family, right? Happy women is good for everybody, right? And women who are controlled, who may not be happy, or who may not necessarily have the freedom to even attain their full potential, is not good for anybody, right? So essentially, it's not just about, we have this chant or the slogan, which we say that it's औरत इज्जत नहीं इंसान है औरत. This is one of our naras. And so
Yeah.
that that woman is not like a woman is not honor. It's she's a human being,
Yeah,
right?
not somebody's honor. Yeah.
Yeah. And so essentially, so much of the control in the families is about, and people may have heard of this, right? That it's not just about sort of honor killings, which are an extreme of that, right? That people, that if a woman in a family does something which is not agreed by their family, often they say, oh, if she has displaced her honor, if she marries outside her choice, or if she goes and meets a man who they don't approve of, or and of course that's heinous and cruel, right? And those are extreme cases of honor. But there's so much of this that I hear so much of this, and I have to say so much. And actually, and I think in all of South Asia, there's this concept of women being the honor of the house, right?
That's
And
so sick and so
it
self
is.
serving.
It's so self-serving. And unfortunately, a lot of that is played up by men to say that this is something special that a woman has, this protection which comes from this, right? So it is the man's duty to protect a woman because she is our honor. Whereas what we talk about taking care of each other, right? So men taking care of women and women taking care of men, right? It's both. We see that this is like, if for any personal relationship, whether that is a relationship between a brother and a sister, or a husband or a wife, or whatever it is, we say that it is about taking care of each other and seeing each other as human beings.
This honor thing is such a big sickness.
It really is, and it's
I mean, if that's how people gauge the family's honor, that then I've dishonored my family my whole life. Essentially, like, and I'm a different person, and they can choose. I mean, you can build your honor based on what your own actions.
yes.
Somebody's honor can't be connected to what I'm doing, and this is the sick most part of desi society, like this
Yeah,
whole sickness of honor.
and and God, it's so insidious, right? We look at it. Yes, of course, there's extreme cases, right? So you have Muhtara Main's case, right, who was ordered to be gang raped because because she destroyed the honor of her family, right, by a jirga. We have those extreme cases. We have cases of honor killings, but it's so insidious. I really want to talk about this, and again, this may be a little bit controversial, but there's this really famous drama in Pakistan called Kabhi Main Kabhi Tum, which is now, it's also really famous in India, or it's getting very famous in India. And and I really liked watching that drama because it's actually really well acted, and it's really like some aspects of it are very new. So it's about a story about this girl who's academic, really really smart. It's played by this actress called Hania Amir, who's become really famous now, and she's actually a really good actress. And so her character is that she's like a really smart person. She's done really well in university, and she's about to get married to a person who's really good on paper, right? And he's kind of seen as this evil arc in the drama, or in the drama serial, or whatever you call it, the TV show. And basically, he wants to marry someone else. So he cancels the wedding. Like, he says, I don't want to marry you. And here is this educated girl, and there's a father. They've shown a father who's really loving and supportive when she wants to get educated. He's like, I love my daughters. But she basically winds up marrying her husband's younger brother, or to be husband's younger brother, just because she is worried about the name, the shame that it brings on their family. And this whole concept of honor. And so then the whole drama or the whole TV serial is about that. And it's a what and it's actually a really nice love story and it's really well acted, it's really popular. But they've shown this independent, educated girl to also fall for all of this, right? Is to it's and says, I, my younger sister is not going to get married. It's because of our honor for our household.
Oh
it's,
my
it's been it's
God.
been disrupted. And so essentially this idea about the woman upholding the honor of the family is something this is so deeply entrenched in South Asian culture, whereas the man who actually has more agency in the family doesn't uphold the doesn't have to uphold the honor
The burden doesn't fall
fall
on him,
at
the
all.
burden falls
Yeah,
on the
yeah,
woman.
yeah. So it's essentially, and I think a lot of people are questioning that now, but it's still so deeply entrenched. And so look at the burden that falls on women. It's just that, and I hear this from so much from women, like I talked in the process of Aurat March and all of the work that we've done, we talk to a lot of women, like we meet a lot of women. So I've heard a lot of stories about how women's lives are and the burden, particularly of in communities where there isn't freedom to work, freedom to get educated. There are some women who do, and then the burden that they say to me that we can't do anything wrong, right? Because if we do something wrong, there are like 20 women in my family who will not be able to go to school,
Oh,
right? So I have
Jesus.
to protect my honor, and it's just yeah. So it's essentially the idea of the woman bringing the shame onto the family. It really, really needs to be disrupted, fought, challenged, and I think that. And I think slowly we're seeing this. We're seeing this across our border in India. We're seeing movements which are speaking up about that. And we're seeing that in Pakistan with a lot of younger women saying, no, we're not. We're not the family's honor. Where, let us work, let us get married to whoever we want. We are not upholding the family's status and the family's izzat, like respect. And I think this is one of the things that Aurat March continues to challenge.
The Aurat March is now in its seventh year. From the time that you guys started, what change have you seen in the society or in people's attitudes or the way it's conducted?
I think that what I would say is that it has definitely, in its first few years, been a conversation starter. So a lot of conversation started around what is happening in women's lives. A lot of younger women would come and tell us that, okay, they have asked, like they're fighting, they've got more room, they've got more strength to fight because they believe that sort of a movement is out there. Was also speaking up about the same thing. I think over the years, what we have found is we have definitely found increased reporting on violence. We have seen a lot of reform within sort of how some of the violence is being addressed by the police and by the government. And those are sort of, particularly with the police, a lot of that work has been done by the feminists in terms of training policemen and also sensitizing them. And of course, we have issues around the judiciary and how some of those cases of violence are addressed. But I think the largest change has been in society that I think we have brought what is happening to the woman into the forefront. We have brought that into the mainstream from the margin. And I think whether that is in the home, whether that is in society, whether that is that it's that women have started what women like different women come and tell me about their experiences of the art march. Like I'll always ask women, okay, how was your experience coming to the art march or coming to the art march again, and or us working in their communities. And I think the biggest change is that the woman says that, some women say to me that it was the first time we were told that it's that, or we felt that it was okay to be women, that it's good to be a woman in our society. It's like this was in Baldia a few months ago, and I actually had tears in my eyes when she said that, the first time I realized that, I also have some importance. So
Wow.
there's that kind of
Yeah.
impact with educated younger women. I hear a lot of these stories about this is the first time I came out and I realized that, okay, what's happening to me is not only happening to me, right? That I can speak up. I can. So it's and I hear a lot of men saying to women, to their partners, to whatever around me, oh, don't be so resistant. You're like one of those Aurat March women. It's a so
I've been told that a lot. Oh,
yeah,
you're one of
yeah,
those Aurat March women. Like in my family,
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
told that all the time. And I'm like, I don't even go to the Aurat March anymore. I don't even live there.
It definitely is a symbol of resistance, of
It's a
speaking up.
label, yeah.
It's a label. It's a symbol of resistance and speaking up. And whenever I hear that women have been told that by men, I definitely say to these women, "Why don't you join the Aurat March? Come to the Aurat March and join the Aurat March."
Yeah,
So
it's
it's like,
actually a badge of honor
yeah,
for
yeah,
me to be told that I'm one of those Aurat
yeah,
March women.
yeah.
Well, hell yeah, I am. Why shouldn't I be?
Yeah, exactly, exactly. I wanna, I want to say that while all of this is happening, right, we are hopeful for a much more feminist future, a brighter future. And so I think, and that is also what keeps us going. So I feel like I've talked a lot about the challenges of patriarchy,
Yeah,
and misogyny and what women go through in South Asia and Pakistan. But I also want to say is that we also have a lot of hope from our struggle. We have a lot of hope that if we can get together, we can fight. We believe a lot in our power of our collective. It has been 8 years, almost 8 years in March, right? Yeah, 2018, 8 years in March. We have all of the work that we have done, and now Aurat March is happening in happens in 6 cities this year. We're happening in there's an Aurat March in Mirpur Khas as well, and so Aurat March across 6 cities. It's completely voluntary labor, um, contrary to belief, sort of some belief that we have Western agenda funding or things like that. We don't. Any none of us are paid to do the work we do. We essentially need some money to organize the day off, and we usually do like donations from friends and from supporters, from feminists. But essentially, it's a labor of love and belief. So it's been 7 years of a lot of women working, laboring to change society. And every year we have more and more women coming in saying, I want to do an audit march in my village. I want to do an audit march in my city. And essentially, uh, and it's actually us who say, okay, we take it slow. We can't just go into 30 cities one year. We don't have that kind of those kind of resources yet. But essentially, we are hopeful because what we're seeing amongst women is anger and rage, and wanting to do something about it. We open up the audit march every year. More people want to join. This year, just within a few days, we had 200 people sign up, 200 women sign up. So it's essentially more and more women are waking up and seeing that if we get together, we are powerful and we can make a difference.
you know, um, Aurat March has an agenda every year,
Mm-hmm.
and because I've reported on it before, I think one of your team members actually told me that there is an agenda which is constructed and thought about very carefully.
Mm-hmm.
What's the agenda for this year, and how do you guys agree on an agenda?
So we have some core demands of the Art March which continue each year. For example, our demands around social security for working class women, living wage for working class women, an end to violence, and then we have some particular demands about what the state needs to do to end violence against women. And so those kind of remain every year. We continue to fight for that. But every year, what we do is we go and we talk to a lot of women and we say, okay, what is happening to women in right now? And so for the last few years, we've really focused more on benefits and social security because there has been a massive, literally a hunger crisis with so much inflation, increase in food prices, the floods in Sindh in 2022. Particularly in middle class households and working class households, literally there were families who are not able to eat, particularly in working class households, 3 times a day. And of course, the brunt of that falls on the women, right? That they're eating less or they're skipping meals so that other people can eat. And it's very much a reality. It's not something romantic to say, but essentially that, oh, that women are all self sacrificing. Like, we believe that the woman also needs healthy and happy meals, like not happy McDonald's meals, but like healthy meals, essentially. So we're continuing some of that agenda. And I think this year, like I've spoken up about, one a lot of the agenda is to highlight and acknowledge and disrupt what's happening with labor at home, with women's roles at home, and highlighting that it is not a woman's role only for the labor of the household, for the labor of the family, and is essentially back to that a woman is also a human being. I think part of the agenda, or part of the theme of Aurat March, is definitely about acknowledgement of women's labor, about paying, we say, adequate living wages for women and social security for women, which means that we believe that every woman should have a certain, depending upon how much they have, a certain stipend coming from the government, which is for her protection. So some of that is we're like we will continue. It's also happening on Mother's Day, so we have some demands for that and some of our views on that as well. That we believe that it is a woman's choice if she wants to become a mother, and that motherhood is a choice, things like that. So you'll see more of
Right.
that as we have a few months, so we'll start talking
I
about it.
believe this is the first time that that motherhood as a choice is going to be introduced. It's going to rattle a lot of men.
Yeah,
100%.
essentially yes. But
And
yeah.
what about the trans community? Because Aurat March, I remember one of the Aurat March organizers telling me that it's an Aurat March. It's not a women's march because Aurat is an inclusive term and we
Yes.
include trans people and the trans community in that. So, are there any specific demands for the trans community as well?
Absolutely, absolutely. So we believe that Aurat March, the movement, has made up of cis women, of trans women, the Pajasara community, which is the indigenous community, and also non-binary persons. Um, so I think one of the biggest things that's happening with the Pajasara community has been that they passed this bill, which was the Transgender Protections Act. It's been about 7 years since the bill has been in force, and last year it was challenged at the Supreme Court, sorry, the Sharia court. And now we have appealed that, not Aurat March, but some people as individuals, but of course Aurat March supports that. So they want their bill to be saved, like the community, the Pakistani community wants their bill to be saved, the Transgenders Protection Act. And also the transgender community is also subjected to
Violence, yeah.
extreme violence, and a lot of that is partner violence, but it's also violence on the streets. There's also the community demands quotas, job quotas, quotas in education systems. And so essentially that's definitely part of our charter as well. And then they have also the Pajasara community in Sindh particularly have a march, which is kind of our sisters march, which we call it like we call it a sister march, I mean, and it's called the
Yeah.
Aurat March,
Yeah.
and that is led by the Fajasira community. And I think that's been amazing. And I think this is the other impact of the Aurat March is that we helped start the first minority rights march in Karachi and in Islamabad. The Sindh Murat March was started. We were allies. We are allies with them as well. And so essentially, what has happened through doing now this year the eighth Aurat March or seventh Aurat Marches has been that it has instigated political activism. It's instigated political activity. A lot of our members are in the climate movement. There's a bit of an urban climate movement. There's a housing rights movement which we've always supported and we were part of before. So, so essentially, I like to really say the Aurat March doesn't belong to anybody; it belongs to everybody. And essentially, of course, there's politics and an idea behind it, but anybody can join. And a lot of people, and they organize in the Audit March for a few years, then they go in and they start like their own feminist group. They'll still organize, they'll do other things. So it's really shown a way to people that you can speak up, you can fight back. And I think that has been its true power. Just it's a, we say that it's like instigating consciousness. And I think that's for me. I would say individually, that's been the best part of it.
The last few years, every time there was an Aurat March, there used to be this counter march happening
Yes,
very close by,
the Haya March.
organized by some, yeah, organized by some other group. I don't want to say anything or name anybody, but like exactly a Haya March. And to me, it gives this feeling that the government was allowing these marches to happen. I mean, you have one day of the year. You can do your Haya March. If your Haya is so important, if your peace and honor and whatever is so important for a woman, you can do it the rest of the year. But they would choose that exact one day. And to me, this gives this feeling that the police and the state and the authorities did not understand that women need that space, even for safety. You don't need another march happening, which is a counter march, which is meant to bring you down just a few meters away. Is that changing? Is the police and is the state, the government, whatever municipality, are they on board with the fact that women just march in peace one day of the year?
I think that it's varied, right? I think that certain, like we have to get permission to march, and so do the other cities, Lahore or March Lahore or March Multan, and there are challenges. I think for us, the Sindh government has been supportive at least to the degree of issuing permission. Um, but sometimes they also revoke it and we have to fight it and that kind of thing. With the Aurat generally there is permission from the Sindh government. Uh, but I think that you have to look at it in the landscape of what's happening in Pakistan also. That I think generally our civil liberties, our freedoms are shrinking. There is less and less space to talk about what's happening in the country, whether those are PICA laws or there are laws which are or general practice of what's happening. You can't criticize the establishment. You can't. So in those sort of conditions, um, we don't necessarily need the government's favor, really, if you think about it, right? We obviously don't really need permission to march, and I think that's always been our position. But if you're talking about overall the what's happening in Pakistan, the space to speak, the space to criticize is it's shrinking. Um, and I think that while it is shrinking, I think that the people are speaking up. The people want to speak up. So that's what we're seeing. We're seeing this conflict where the space is shrinking, but more and more people are speaking up, and we're seeing that sort of in mainstream politics as well. We're seeing that in progressive politics that we're doing, in feminist politics that we're doing, and I think the struggle continues for that.
Thank you so much for being here and speaking about it while revealing yourself.